The moon is the only other world human beings have ever stood on, and for 54 years, nobody went back. The last crew left in 1972, and after that, every human being alive stayed within a few hundred miles of Earth. 12 people walked on the moon between 1969 and 1972. Then it stopped. The machines that could get there were retired, and for the next half-century, every human being in space stayed in low Earth orbit. Then the doors of the vehicle assembly building opened, and the rocket that would break that streak came out on a crawler, moving at less than 1 mile an hour. It crawled 4 miles to Launch Complex 39B. There it sat, through sunset and sunrise, while the countdown ran. Their names were Reid Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen of the Canadian Space Agency. They had been training for this since 2023. Part of that training was learning to photograph the moon. One pass at speed through a small window. There would be no second attempt. And in Houston, teams flew the mission again and again in a simulator, so that nothing about the real flight would be new. On the morning of the launch, they walked out to the pad in orange pressure suits, the way crews have done since the beginning. They were not going to land. Artemis II was a test flight, one enormous loop out to the moon and back, to prove that the ship could carry a crew there and bring them home alive. It flew on the Space Launch System, the rocket NASA built to leave low Earth orbit again. In the first moments, the stack burns through fuel faster than a swimming pool drains, and the sound reaches the shoreline seconds after the light does. And then it was gone, and 4 people were on a trajectory that no living human had ever flown. Reaching orbit was not the same as leaving. To actually go, they had to light the engine one more time and turn a circle around the Earth into a line to the moon. Orion is small, 4 people for 10 days, in a cabin about the size of a large van. Below them, in Houston, flight controllers watched a spacecraft carrying human beings drift steadily further from Earth than anyone had been in half a century. It took them 5 days to cross the gap. On the 6th of April, Orion came around the leading edge of the moon. At 7 in the evening Eastern Time, they passed just 4,067 miles above the lunar surface. They were moving at 60,863 miles an hour relative to Earth, but relative to the moon, just 3,139. The moon had caught them and was swinging them around. And at 44 minutes past 6, the moon came between Orion and the Earth, and the radio went dead. Behind the moon, there is no line home, no relay, no workaround. More than 2,000 miles of rock sits directly between you and everyone you have ever known. For 40 minutes, there was no telemetry, no voice, no data. 4 people were behind the moon, and the planet they came from could do nothing but wait. They came back out at 25 minutes past 7. 2 minutes later, they reached the farthest point of the entire flight, 252,756 miles from Earth. That broke a record that had stood since 1970. Apollo 13 had gone further from Earth than any crew before or since. Artemis II beat it by 4,111 miles. For about 7 hours they worked. 30 designated targets on the lunar surface, photographed and studied by human eyes in person for the first time since 1972. And then something happened that nobody on Earth could see. At 35 minutes past 8, Orion flew into the moon's shadow. From where they were, the moon was large enough to cover the sun completely for nearly 54 minutes. 54 minutes of totality. On Earth, standing in exactly the right place, a total solar eclipse lasts a handful of minutes at best. They put on eclipse viewers, and they watched the sun go out behind the moon. And around the black edge of the moon, the corona came out. The sun's outer atmosphere, the part we can normally only glimpse for a few minutes at a time from the ground if the weather holds. Nearly 54 minutes, 4 people watched the sun's outer atmosphere from a place no telescope on Earth can reach. Earlier that same evening, at 41 minutes past 6, one of them had pointed a camera out of the window and taken this. In December 1968, the crew of Apollo 8 came around the moon and watched the Earth rise. That photograph changed how our species saw itself. 58 years later, from the same place, a different crew watched the Earth go down behind the Moon instead. Earthset, everything anyone has ever known, setting like a moon over someone else's horizon. Before they could come home, the service module that had carried them the whole way was cut loose. Hitting there is only half of it. Coming back from the Moon means hitting the atmosphere at nearly 35 times the speed of sound. The heat shield reached about 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The crew took up to 3.9 G on the way down. At 37 minutes past 7, Orion fired an 18-second burn to set its entry angle and line the heat shield up with the atmosphere. There is no second attempt at that. Waiting for them in the Pacific was a recovery team that had been rehearsing this for years. On the 10th of April, at 7 minutes past 8 in the evening, Orion came down under 3 parachutes into the Pacific Ocean off San Diego. 9 days, 1 hour and 32 minutes, 694,481 miles. The recovery ship USS John P. Murtha was waiting. Within 2 hours, all 4 of them were off the water. At its peak, more than 3.5 million people watched the launch live. More than that watched them come home. In those 10 days, NASA's website was viewed 125 million times. They did not land on the Moon. That is still ahead. What Artemis II proved is that the ship works, that people can ride it out there and come back, and that the next crew can go further. Artemis III flies in 2027. It will not land either. It is a rehearsal in Earth orbit to test the system that eventually puts people back on the surface. The landing itself comes with Artemis IV. For 54 years, the Moon was somewhere we used to go. It is not anymore. This is UniOrb. Follow for the real story of the universe every week.